Okay, it's about 10:01 and greetings and welcome to BECC's Utility Innovation for Data-Driven Decision Making. My name is Dr. Lisa Legaspi. I am the Energy Management Supervisor at SoCalGas, Southern California Gas Company. I am also a behavioral science practitioner and an organizational leadership doctor. With me today, our panelists are Dr. Mariateresa Silvi. She'll be presenting Reversing Impatience, Framing Mechanisms to Increase the Purchase of Energy Savings Appliances. Dr. Silvi is the European Green Deal Officer at the University of Ghent in Belgium. She has a PhD in Applied Economics. She conducts policy-oriented research, mostly through behavioral economics and econometric analysis, focusing on the transition towards a just and sustainable economy. Welcome, Dr. Silvi. We also have Dr. Megan Nyquist. She'll be speaking on applied user research, leveraging customer feedback to create engaging digital experience. Megan is the Senior Manager of Product Marketing for Franklin Energy and AM Conservation Group. She serves as key member of the product management team responsible for reimagining the way utilities help their customers save energy and reduce carbon. Collaborating closely with product managers, user experience researchers, designers, and product operations, she helps to shape the services and technology product built for utilities. Prior to her role on the product management team, Megan served as a digital marketing manager on the client services team and has been at the company for over 7 years. She holds a BA from Marquette University, as well as several digital marketing and product marketing certifications. Welcome, Megan. We also have Amy Finley sharing thumbs up, increased customer engagement through highly relevant email communications. Amy is a supervisor at Customer Engagement Strategy and Energy Efficiency Marketing at Eversource. Amy leads a team focused on creating targeted, personalized digital interactions to encourage energy savings behavior, drive participation in energy efficiency programs, and improve customer satisfaction. She focuses on finding unique ways to incorporate data into the customer experience, translating it into insight that resonate and motivate action. Prior to joining Eversource, Amy worked as a professional engineer in the real estate development and construction industry, designing and monitoring construction of building foundations and overseeing maintenance of storm water system of large retail facilities across New England. Amy holds a BS in Civil Engineering from the University of Notre Dame and an MBA from the University of Michigan. And we have Dustin Kunkel as well, presenting on fast feedback residential DR impact, Arizona. Dustin is a managing consultant at Guidehouse. He has a master's degree in applied economics and primarily works on impact evaluation using regression models. And last but not certainly the least, Dr. Sanem Sergici, presenting on impact evaluation for the PC44 time of use pilots. Dr. Sergici, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is a principal at the Brattle group. She specializes in the economic analysis of their DRS, their impact on distribution system operations and assessment of emerging utility business models and regulatory frameworks. She regularly assists electric utilities, regulators, law firms, and technology firms on matters related to innovative retail rate design, big data analytics, and grid modernization investments, electrification and decarbonization strategies. Welcome to all our panelists. Before we begin with the presentations, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Just as a reminder, before we start, please remember to put your mic on mute when not speaking. If you have any questions, please make sure to post it on the chat box. We'll have a chat box. We will try to answer all questions at the end of the panel presentations. And if we are unable to do so, please do send me an email, Legaspi@socalgas.com, and I will direct your questions to the appropriate presenter. Each panelist are given 5 to 7 minutes to present. After all the panelists have completed their presentations, they will address your questions at the end. Please note that we have limited time, but we will try to address all the questions. And without further delay, we will start with Dr. Silvi on reversing impatience, framing mechanisms to increase the purchase of energy savings appliances. Dr. Silvi, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So thanks to everyone for joining this session. Today I'm going to present a survey experiment which we undertook at the Autonomous University of Barcelona with my co-author, Dr. Emilio Padilla Rosa. For this paper, we would like to acknowledge funding from the Time-Sharing Experiments for the Social Sciences, which is a US National Science Foundation program. The paper has just been published in Energy Economics and is available open access to everyone. So in this paper, we looked at the decision to purchase an energy efficient appliance as an example of an intertemporal decision, because typically when individuals choose an energy efficient appliance, they have to pay a higher price for economic savings in the long term, since operating energy efficient appliances is cheaper compared to inefficient appliances. Therefore, the decision to buy an energy efficient appliance or not involves a trade-off on whether we are between saving money immediately or saving money in the long term. But this trade-off is not always apparent in the decision process. Therefore, the goal of this experiment was to see whether we can frame operating costs of different appliances in a way that individuals are induced to buy, are more likely to buy energy efficient appliances. So we undertake a survey experiment on a nationally representative sample of the US adult population. We give individuals an hypothetical choice where they have to replace their refrigerator, and they have to choose between an appliance which is more efficient but pricier, and it entails economic savings in the long term, and another appliance which is cheaper to buy, but it is less efficient and it costs more to operate it. And the trade-off between these two appliances is such that choosing the energy efficient appliance is always leaves the individual better off in the long term economically, because the difference in operating cost is higher compared to the difference in the prices of the two appliances. And we also measure separately individual temporal preferences to see whether this affects choice. So our design assigns to each individual a different framing of operating of electricity consumption information. Some individuals in the control group see electricity consumption information in terms of kilowatt hour per year. A second group of individuals see lifetime operating costs, so how much it would cost to operate each machine over its duration. And this is what had been done earlier in the literature with limited results. In our experiment, instead, we add a third dimension where we tell individuals how much it would cost to operate each appliance, but we also add a patience-inducing message. So we tell individuals that if they choose the energy efficient appliance, they will save a certain amount of dollars compared to the other appliance by 2035, which is the end of the lifespan of the appliance. And we also add, we also control for different individuals see a different number of appliance attributes. We have 6 conditions, and we want to see how these affect purchase intentions. This is how the experiment looked like. So there was a comparative table with different the different appliance characteristics being listed, and then individuals had to choose. So this is our first result. We find that the percentage of energy efficient appliance chosen was highest in our treatment T2, and we find that the effect was up to 24 percentage points higher compared to the control group, and also compared to T1, our treatment reached an increase in energy efficient choices by 7 percentage points. The marginal effects of being included in T2 corresponded to an increased likelihood of buying the energy efficient appliance by almost 20 percentage points. We calculate based on the model settings that we include that this could have led to energy efficiency saving of 7.5% or 0.64 billion kilowatt hour in just a year. We see that individuals who are more impatient are more affected by our treatment, and therefore that our treatment helped people who are usually impatient to be more likely to choose the energy efficient appliance. We also looked at whether being included in a given treatment group affected how individual characteristics influence choice. And we found that there were differences. In particular, we found that individuals who had economic problems, such as people who expected their economy to deteriorate in the future, and people who had no savings, they were less likely to buy the energy efficient appliance if they were in the control group or in T1, that they became more likely to buy the energy efficient appliance if they were in our treatment. This indicates to us that making people aware of the fact that energy efficiency is a way of saving money can actually help individuals who have financial constraints to actually see energy efficiency as a way to save money in the future. And we also found that there was a negative effect of political conservative views on the likelihood to buy the energy efficient appliance for the control group and in T1, but not in our T2. So our conclusions are that making individuals aware of the intertemporal trade-off implied by energy efficient choices can help them to actually invest in energy efficiency. Our framing increased energy efficiency by 7.5 percentage points, and we find that the effectiveness of our treatment was delivered through the inhibiting impatient preferences and by highlighting how individuals can save money by choosing energy efficiency. 7 minutes, so my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Silvi. Just some promotional plugs. I'm sure you can hear me. Effectively engaging customers starts with getting their attention. Oracle applies artificial intelligence and behavioral science to personalize the experience for every utility customer. Learn more at oracle.com/utilities. Moving on to our second speaker, Megan Nyquist. She'll be speaking on applied user research, leveraging customer feedback to create engaging digital experience. Let's welcome Megan.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the process that our team takes to developing new solutions for our utility customers. As noted here on the slide, understanding how users will interact with the solutions, understanding how users will interact with the solutions we provide is really important to both their participation and ultimately the success of the solution overall. So over the next few minutes, I'll dive into our solutioning process and share some interesting learnings that we gathered during our shift in program delivery during 2020. As safety concerns around COVID-19 rose, we really needed to shift our traditional in-home assessment solution into something that would still deliver high quality energy savings while keeping everyone safe. So as with any research process, we started with gathering data. As an input into our solutioning sprint, we created a quantitative survey measuring homeowners' self-reported propensity, sentiment rankings, and other preferences. In order to recruit these respondents, we used Amazon Mechanical Turk to gather 810 participating US consumers. These participants ranged in region, population density, age, gender, income, etc. The goal here was really to understand how homeowners were feeling about home improvement projects during the pandemic and how they felt about people entering their home to perform these services. And here are the results. Overall, we saw that people's key priorities remain their home health and comfort, followed closely by saving money. The environmental concerns ranked much lower on their priority list, which from a marketing perspective is not surprising, but I think we would all hope that that would be a little bit higher. In addition, and probably most surprising, is that chart on the right there. You can see that the majority of the participants preferred text chat and video call over traditional phone calls, and in-person visits ranked extremely low on their preferences. So this really showed us that our kind of traditional in-home assessment solutions, where somebody's coming to the home, walking through, installing efficient products, really needed to adapt to the changing customer preferences. And while 57% of consumers were likely to schedule a virtual energy audit, the ideal length of time was only about 30 minutes. And that meant that our solution needed to be much more efficient than our traditional in-home walkthroughs have been typically. And ultimately, this research showed us that customers want to avoid talking to people as much as possible. And so we needed to develop a solution that allowed for that, but still provided them the things like energy efficiency kits and home energy recommendations that they found valuable. So what's next? Now that we had all that research in place, we started our week-long sprint process. This process is based on the Google Ventures product development methodology and is something that our team follows on a regular basis when we're developing new solutions. With our pre-sprint input gathered, we start out the week by defining the end goal, interviewing stakeholders, and identifying our target. Then on Tuesday, we gather our notes and start sketching out ideas. Wednesday is spent debating over different sketches and ultimately ending up with a storyboard of our solution. Then on Thursday, our busiest day, we spend the day actually building a prototype. Yes, we do that in one day. It's not perfect, but it's good enough because on Friday, that allows us to test out our solution live with real users and get immediate feedback. So when we went into the sprint week, it was really important for us to also look outside of just the utility industry for inspiration. The team looked into other digital delivery models with companies like Daily Harvest, Blue Apron, Duolingo, and others to see how they were able to gather needed customer information in an engaging and non-intrusive way to quickly and easily provide them personalized offerings. And ultimately, we determined that our solution needed to be scalable. It needed to have a clean and intuitive layout. We also knew that it had to have multiple participation paths to allow the customer to choose what was best for them. Social proof and expectation setting were important on the front end of the experience, where a quiz style layout and address-based validation were important components of the data collection steps. So this is a look at what we ended up with. I don't have time to show the whole solution today, but just a couple of key things to call out. Customers were segmented at the beginning of the process with an address-based validation step, and then were led through a series of quiz questions to gather information around their lifestyle, propensity, and preferences. These questions featured simple language and a graphic multiple choice interface, which allowed the customer to easily navigate through 10 questions in a matter of minutes. These quiz answers then presented the customer with several participation paths based on their answers and their unique qualifications. So things like self-assessment only, self-assessment with a one-to-one video support and a kit, or even a self-assessment with a traditional in-person direct install appointment. Then on Friday, we moved into the user testing. So we used a platform called UserZoom to recruit our 10 participants from all over the country. And we participated in a Zoom interview where we prompted them to complete key tasks and provide real-time feedback on their thoughts throughout the experience. And here are just a quick look at some of the results. I don't have a ton of time, so I'll let you read through some of these quotes here. But overall, the users really liked the solution and said that they would participate if their local utility offered it, COVID-19 or not. So really liked the option for them to participate online and have a lower level of commitment ultimately. With the quiz, they really liked the language that was used, the approachable kind of ability to their answers with helpful pictures, and the conversational tone of it overall. And then finally, just the self-service option results. They really liked that we were able to pull in a lot of information on their home based on the inputs that they provide us. And we also allowed them to have access to live chat. So if there was a question that asking about maybe how their home is heated that they didn't quite understand, we were able to have professional assistance there for them as well. And this is just a quick look at the appointment scheduling results. So they were able to actually complete a scheduled appointment if that is the channel that they selected. So they really liked that we offered them the ability to get things like confirmation texts and even be able to have a virtual visit because they didn't have an appointment window at that point. It was a scheduled time to talk with an energy expert about their home's recommendations. And we got a lot of really great feedback about that. All right, so just in conclusion, after completing the sprint process, of course, the work isn't done. So we continue to iterate on this solution based on new research findings, as well as real program performance that we gather by identifying different pilot opportunities and establishing baselines that we measure against. So that is all the time for me. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Megan. Very interesting. And I myself would want to talk to you later to know more. So with that said, we'll move on to the next speaker, Amy Finley, sharing thumbs up, increasing customer engagement through highly relevant email communication. Amy?
Excellent, thank you. So excited to be here today to talk about something that is near and dear to me and my team, creating these personalized sort of outbound email experiences for customers. So I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce the team that makes it happen. So Gregory and Christina, who are also in this presentation, but I'm going to be the one that's kind of delivering a summary of what exactly we did and some of the results that we got. So just for those of you that aren't familiar with Eversource, we're the largest energy company in New England across 3 states. We have about 4 million electric, gas, and water customers, about 8,300 employees, and still hold the title of the #1 EE provider in the nation. So something that we like to talk about. And just a bit of a background for these bill alerts. So during the summer of 2020, obviously, with more people working from home and an increased interest in, their energy usage, we were tasked with, coming up with ways to deliver customized insights to people who might have a lower ability to pay their bill, but they're using more electricity. And we really wanted to use this as an opportunity to capitalize on this interest in energy to get people energy efficiency tips and get them participating in our programs as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the design and how we incorporated customer feedback and use that to sort of personalize the experience. And just in terms of the results, the open rates that we got across all of our email sends exceeded 50%. A lot of times, 60 or 70% of customers like opening these emails, which if anyone deals with email marketing, it's a pretty good number. And over 96% of customers with every send were indicating that they found the emails useful, which was really encouraging. So I think a lot that had to do with that was, just sort of my team's philosophy on how we approach these communications and all the input that we got, up front to sort of assure that we were going to be delivering something that customers found valuable. So looking at the design of these communications, we have access to an online community of about 400, well, it's a larger community than that, but about 400 Eversource customers, gave us feedback on a prototype of these bill alert emails. And we really sort of started from scratch just because we knew sort of what we were going to be able to deliver with the team that we had in place in a short period of time. We knew that they were going to have to be email alerts. We couldn't do anything fancy with like bill integrations or anything like that. And we knew that we would be able to deliver these alerts within a few days after a customer received their bill, but due to the sort of latency of the data that we're working with, we don't have AMI, so we can't deliver things. We just have these monthly reads and monthly usage and build usage to work with. So trying to make that data interesting and deliver it, in these insights in a timely fashion was something that we needed to sort of sort out. So thankfully, customers said that they wanted to receive these alerts by email, which was great. And then a few days after receiving their bill was okay, which was also great because that's how we were planning to deliver it. And they wanted to see these alerts when their bill increased by $25 or more. So that was important for us because we also didn't have the ability to set, preferences like many companies do. You can set alerts when, your bill exceeds a certain amount, but we don't have that ability. This was going to be, an opt-out sort of campaign that we were going to be delivering. So over on the left here, just something interesting that we found, in our research with these customers, that interest in getting these bill alerts generally decrease with the amount of the bill. So that's not true for, customers who had bills that were summer bills that were less than $50. But you're really seeing this sort of, more sensitivity with customers that are, around the like 50 to 100 range, and then it sort of drops off from there. Probably has something to do with, the amount of income that you have or the ability to pay these bills. That if you've got a bigger house, you have a higher bill, and maybe you're just not as focused on these sort of, $25 changes. But another interesting takeaway and something that we were concerned with was at the time our call centers were getting, overloaded with customers who are really concerned about being able to pay their bill. So the foremost concern that we had there was, if we send out these sort of proactive alerts or unsolicited emails with this really personalized information, are we going to be creating a burden on our call centers, and add to the volume that they were already having trouble handling? So thankfully, a majority of customers said they would want to solve this problem in a digital channel, either going to eversource.com to see more ways to save, emailing us back, or just, simply saying that receiving this notice was enough. And that was heartening for us to hear, because that was really what our goal was just to provide, some helpful information, even if customers didn't want to take the next step. So here's an example of the two different versions of the alerts that we pulled together. And at the top here on the title slide, this was the subject line of the email. And I think that this was so crucial to us seeing the open rates that we did, and that we're putting, the meat and potatoes of these communications like right in the subject line here, and just telling customers that their bill increased, and, opening up the email with saying, hey, this is just something that we noticed. And then we've got the two different sorts of versions here for low income customers versus the energy efficiency for our market rate customers, where in the low income version, you can see at the bottom, after providing some explanation, and Gregory did all this awesome like data crunching, and Christina pulls in the custom values into our emails. But we were able to, sort of break it down where, here's a couple things that might have affected your bill, but then go right into like the recommendations. And for the low income version, we pointed people toward assistance programs, whereas for the EE version, we were pointing them towards some of our programs. And the key element here was including this poll that we got over 10,000 responses to across these, over 300,000 alerts that we sent. But we just wanted to know if customers, did find this information useful. So the answers are here. And like I said, kind of said it in my opening slide, but we did find a good percentage of customers that were finding these, like over 96% of customers who are answering the poll, finding these communications valuable, which was really great for us to hear. And then, we also looked at the amount of the increase to see if, there was any difference sort of based on our, the feedback that we got in the online community before we rolled this out. Was it that customers who had the lower bill increase or lower amount of the increase bill over bill, like found it less helpful? But, generally there's maybe a few trends that you could pick out there, but I think that the biggest difference that we observed here was looking at, customers who received multiple emails. So that means that their bill from June to July might have gone up by $25, and then their July to August bill went up by $25. So they got the alert again. And you see where that sort of, drop off in open rates happened between the early summer sends versus the late summer sends. And we think, there's a couple things that could be going on there. We, didn't want to be the boy that cried wolf and send sort of the same sort of notification like multiple times. So there were very few customers that got 3 of these alerts, but it was usually about 2. But we also thought, maybe customers were on vacation, like by the end of like when they were getting these alerts in August and just weren't paying as much attention to email potentially. So haven't really dug into exactly what happened there, but just moving on to my key takeaways, because I think I'm coming up against time here. But bottom line is, there's been a lot of talk in the other panels as well about, behavior change. And ultimately what this comes down to is your ability to capture customers' attention. And we focus so much on that because you can have the best program, you can have like the most important message to deliver, but ultimately if you're not reaching your customers and communicating with them in ways that show that you understand them by personalizing, you're personalizing the communications, making it feel like it's something that's for them and it's relevant. It's the key to getting their attention. Also not expecting customers to draw their own conclusions. Like I said, if you've got something that you want to tell your customers, put it, in the subject line of your email if you have the ability to do that. Just because, everyone is so in a increasingly digital world, pulled in so many different directions that the more you can kind of get at the meat of what you're trying to say sooner, the better. So, and with that, I will turn it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I think you have a lot of questions and we can address later. So we'll move on to the next speaker. And that's Dustin. Dustin will be presenting fast feedback residential DR impacts Arizona.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about a residential demand response impact evaluation that Guidehouse has conducted for the last few years and how we leveraged our available data to change up our modeling approach and how that worked out. Spoiler alert, it worked out pretty well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have submitted this abstract. So some quick background information. In 2018 and 2019, APS ran some test seasons for their Cool Rewards program. And that's a residential demand response program that uses smart thermostat temperature setbacks. So during the event, they'll call events and then participants' smart thermostat will automatically adjust the temperature setting based on the event parameters. So one thing that is unusual with APS is that sometimes with these types of things, you'll see a pre-cool period associated with the event. So the thermostat leading up to the event will lower the set point to cool the house down. And then during the event, it'll raise it. The idea being that then the event comes, it's already cooler in the house, it's more comfortable. They get better impacts that way. But APS has a lot of people on time of use rates, and so they don't want to pre-cool during high rate times. So they'll have, in some cases, a pre-cool period that is like 5 hours before the event, and it'll go for 2 hours, and there'll be this gap of 3 hours before the event actually happens. So that has some consequences that we can talk about in a second. So previously, during these 2018 and 2019 seasons, Guidehouse conducted impact evaluation at the end of the season, and we used a participant-only weather-matched non-event day regression model. And that's a mouthful, and another good reason to change to something called fast feedback, which is a lot easier to say. So in 2020, the program was scaling up quickly. I think they had around 25,000 devices enrolled in 2020. And APS requested faster delivery of impact estimates, so they didn't have to wait till the end of the season. A couple reasons for that. The big one being that the existing in-season impact estimates from the implementation platform didn't align well with our evaluated impact estimates, which creates kind of an awkward situation because events happen, people want to know what happened. There's only one number available at that point, or there was. And so that number like gets out there, and then end of season comes along like, oh wait, that number is not quite right. So that they have to go revise things. It's just terrible. The other reason being that with accurate in-season impact estimates, that really helps with their planning during the DR season. So they can test out new event strategies. Let's say 1 week they'll have, maybe they'll test a 3-degree setback instead of 2 degrees. And then if they have the results, the impact estimates from that within a week, the next week, still within the same season, they can understand better how that's going to perform when they're planning this event for the next event, rather than having to wait an entire year. So we certainly had the data available to run some sort of model that was not reliant on waiting until the end of the season. Whether it would be any good was a different question. We ultimately decided that we didn't really need to focus too much on this weather matching business, because in other areas, maybe it's important, because if you start looking at days in May, people might not even be running their air conditioning. And so like looking at their meter data during that time frame might not be very informative. That is not the case in Phoenix. It's just hot there, even in May. Like, this table shows the daily high temperatures in the month leading up to the first event in 2020, and it's just always over 100. So we decided to focus more on a non-participant matching methodology, where we take a large pool of non-participants and match the participants to them based on hourly usage patterns from some period prior to the event. And we don't really care that much about weather. We just take like 4 to 6 weeks prior to the event, use all the days. We'll occasionally throw out holidays and unusually cool days. If there's like days that in here would have been in the 90s or something, we would probably throw that one out. But mostly we assume the weather is just gonna not matter that much. So using that methodology, we were indeed able to produce results quickly within a week of a DR event in 2020. And that was very useful for APS. In 2020, they were able to identify some dispatch issues based on that and correct them for the next event. They're also able to, like I mentioned before, examine different event strategies and learn how they perform and take that into account when they're planning the next event within season. But of course, it wouldn't be very useful if we were just back to the original problem of results needing to be revised significantly at the end of the season. So we did compare this new methodology with the previous methodology, and these fast feedback results did align well with the end of season results. We also ran some test days, which I have example plots of here. These are days that look like an event, but no event was called. And so we expect if we run our model here, our kind of predicted baseline would line up well with the actual usage if our model is doing a good job. And in this case, they lined up well. They actually lined up better than these same tests done with our previous methodology. So this was really just better in every way. It was faster. It seems to be more accurate. So I think one of my main takeaways here was I'm glad that we were willing to look at our data and not get boxed in by existing methodologies, and ended up with something that seems to be more accurate and is more useful for our clients. So with that, I will hand it back.
Thank you very much, Dustin. And I can see there's some questions, and feel free to answer it in the chat box for those who have questions. I think there's several for Amy and several for Dustin. We'll move on to the next speaker, Dr. Sergici, presenting on the impact evaluation for the PC44 time of use pilots. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this most recent time of use pilots that was conducted by Maryland Joint Utilities. And it lasted for 2 years, and we were involved in the design and evaluation of the pilot. So I'm going to talk about some of the important results from the pilot. But I wanted to start with the experience with time varying pricing over the next decade. My colleague Ahmed Faraki and I have been tracking the impacts from time varying programs over the next decade, over the last decades, from 70 plus pilots and 400 plus treatments. And then this data very clearly indicates that residential customers respond to time varying rates regardless of the rate design. And yet, while some jurisdictions are moving on with full-scale offerings of time varying rates, some other jurisdictions are testing these rates to ensure that they identify the best rate designs and best deployment methods for their jurisdictions. So BGE, PEPCO, and DPL, collectively referred to as Joint Utilities of Maryland, have implemented time of use pilots that ran for 2 years. The peak to off-peak price ratio was very pronounced in these rates that were tested, which were time of use rates, and they varied from about 4 to 6 across the joint utilities. And peak hours also varied by season. Hour ending 15 through 19 on summer weekdays, so essentially an evening peak in the summer weekdays and a morning peak on non-summer weekdays. We quantify the results separately for each utility and each season. But there are also some unique features of the PC44 TOU pilot that I want to highlight here very quickly. First of all, it was designed in a collaborative work group setting with various stakeholders over the course of a year. Like every single parameter of the pilot design was vetted by different perspectives contributed by OPC and in energy department and other interveners in Maryland. The time of use rates apply to generation, transmission, and distribution, and not just to the generation, as has often been the case with prior time of use pilots. The peak to off-peak differentials were sizable, which is very important in these time varying rates. If the signal is very muted between peak and off-peak, the customers do not tune into it, and the rate design basically becomes ineffective for load shifting purposes. So in the case of PC44 time of use pilots, the price signal was very strong. And another unique and neat element of the PC44 pilot is that the peak periods were relatively short. This allowed customers to respond more easily by reducing their peak usage and shifting some of it to off-peak periods. Another important attribute of the pilot is that in addition to testing time of use rates on average residential customers, there was another treatment group specifically designed and designated for low and moderate income customers, because Commission had a specific interest in understanding responsiveness of LMI, low and moderate income customers in this pilot. We used a match control group design to analyze and evaluate the impact of the pilot. So it was a quasi-experimental design, and that customers who were initially randomly chosen for recruitment were provided with a personalized estimate of their potential savings under the time of use rate design at the beginning of the recruitment. In other words, as a customer, you went into this pilot having a knowledge and feel for what kind of impacts that you could expect with your participation in this pilot. So there were scenarios in the bill inserts about what happens when they shift nothing versus 3% versus 5%. Last but not least, treatment customers also got weekly behavioral load shaping messages designed by Oracle to reinforce the price signal. So they were always in tune to the message of time varying rates and were able to figure out ways to shift their usage from peak to off-peak periods. So it featured a really comprehensive design. In terms of the recruitment overview, the recruitment rates were pretty low for this pilot. There are various reasons for this, such as a short period of enrollment, but also the fact that the customers were provided very detailed information on their potential savings, and in some customers that they wouldn't save at all or they would lose money on the time of use rates, really provided some customers with, especially the risk-averse ones, with immediate rejection on participating in this pilot program. So that's one of the hypotheses that's why the opt-in rates were on the lower end. The customers across all three utilities, the share of LMI and non-LMI enrollment rates were quite similar, and that structural winners also found to enroll more so than the non-savers under the program. So we have utilized a very robust statistical analysis involving difference in difference analysis and matched control group approach. We've estimated substitution and daily price elasticities such that other rates can be modeled along the way after the conclusion of this pilot. And we've also evaluated impacts for various subgroups. So what we found is that for summer weekday peak impacts, we detected economically and statistically significant peak load reductions. For LMI customers, impacts ranged from 7.5% to 14.5% peak reductions. For non-LMI customers, the peak impacts were in the range of 10.9% to 15.1%. And very important finding is that the magnitude of the LMI impacts, low-income customer impacts, could not be statistically distinguished from the impact of the non-LMI customers, refuting the hypothesis that LMI customers cannot respond to time varying rates or will not respond to time varying rates. So with a robust design in this pilot, this hypothesis has been very conclusively refuted. On the non-summer weekdays, the impacts were lower, but they were still there. That again, LMI impacts could not be statistically distinguished from that of the non-LMI customers. The customers achieved bill impacts in the range of bill savings in the range of 2.2% to 9.7%, depending on the utility and year. And the savings were generally similar across LMI and non-LMI customers. And to just recap, lots of interesting conclusions, especially the one about LMI and non-LMI customers responding similarly. Another important conclusion is that 2/3 of the pilot participants were structural winners, meaning that they were going to automatically win under these rates because of their initial load profiles. And that created some concerns that maybe these customers were just going to free ride and don't change their consumption behavior at all. But that was not verified by the pilot. Structural winners' peak reductions were comparable to those of other customers, meaning that structural winners did not just sit back and relax, and they participated in the pilot and shifted their usage from peak to off-peak periods. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sergici. That was great, and thank you to all the panelists. And now we'll go to some of the questions that were not answered. I see Dustin responded to Kara and also Sanem, but there are some questions for Amy, and we'll start with that. Me being asking the first question, which is, are these emails for residential only?
Yes, they were only for residential customers. So there was less of a concern, and this is kind of what additional analysis showed, like commercial and industrial customers' usage actually decreased, over this time period. So all the increases, were being felt by residential customers who are spending more time at home.
Did you see any barriers in relation to customer response utilizing email for digital?
So can you expand on that question?
Yeah, normally there are,
like,
for example, a barrier could be the timing of when they saw it and the response, how quickly they respond to it, or did it go to their spam? Could be a barrier, Or also a potential barrier is not the right person that received the email or the communication.
Yeah, so we were, very, and I don't know, Christina is an email guru. And when I reported those stats, those were actually emails that were delivered. This is not customers who were sent the email. So those open rates were pretty sound. I think maybe what you were asking for is in relation to the poll. And we didn't look at, if that's part of your question, like the timing of when a customer like opened or replied to the poll versus like what their response was. I think there are so many different ways we could cut this data and analyze this data, but in the interest of like time and like resources, kind of having to move on to like the next thing, we didn't really get into, as much of that granular of analysis as we probably could have with some of this, but definitely a good question. Does that kind of get to what you were asking, Lisa?
Yes, but I think it would be a deeper conversation because barriers do exist based on my experience in relation to how, for example, maybe they were not the correct recipient to make that decision, or
yeah, I mean, we use the email address of like the primary account holder. So I think you
Right.
always have, there's really not a good way to distinguish, I mean, our billing email addresses usually would match the ones that we sent to. So there's a good chance that whoever was receiving bills at that email address was the same person that had seen our bill alert.
Okay, well, thank you. And
Yep.
There's more questions from me for you.
Yeah.
And it's from Jessica.
I think there was one from Nick earlier up too. I'm just looking
Is
at the
there
chat
anyone?
now. So this was about the Eversource like customer
yes.
panel. So that's a good question about, how we recruit for that like online panel. And this is sort of handled outside of our energy efficiency group, but we, will recruit to try and be as representative as we can, based on like demographics. And we have like equal sort of representation between electric and gas customers and, split proportionally across, we have the fewest customers in New Hampshire. We have the most customers in Massachusetts, doing it even down to like the zip code level, considering like income, own or rent, age of your house even, there's a lot of data that we have to try and make sure that this customer panel is as representative as it could be. I think you always face the challenge of, if you have customers who are willing to participate in the panel, they would generally think of Eversource favorably. So I think you have to take that lens with any of the answers that you're getting from the panel are going to be skewed, I think, more positively and favorably toward, whatever you're trying to do just by nature of how the panel was created. So I think that was why we really wanted to see, okay, the panel's telling us this is a good idea. They were telling us that we would want this, when we roll it out more broadly, is that going to be, how representative was our panel and the information that they were providing for us? And we were glad that it appeared to be representative. So it was good.
The next one is still yours, is Jessica.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So it looks like email is still preferred from the stats that you gave for like energy usage and bill payment. So email is still preferred, but like text is sort of creeping up as important. And I think that when it has to do with the level of urgency. And I think that if you are going to send some alerts via text, it should be something that requires your immediate attention. I think that's the way the majority of people operate. When you get a text, you are more likely to read it and respond to it than you are when you get an email. For example, like I think most text messages get read within, an hour, whereas maybe you let your emails, not your work emails, I'm sure, because you got to stay on top of those. But if you got like personal emails, maybe you let those go for half a day, check them when you get home at night, and actually when you have more time to sit with them or follow up and take an action. So I think that's touching on a really important point though, about, making sure that the message that you're delivering is through the right channel based on the importance and sort of the action that you want a customer to take. And if you look at, the content of those bill alerts, like those were meaty emails. This is not like a quick, And this is something else that we monitor engagement with these emails. You know, we can tell whether a customer just like glanced, skimmed, or read, and that read metric, you know, is looking at an email for greater than 8 seconds. And we got, you know, over 60-70% of customers were it appeared that they were taking the time to really read the content of the email. And when you're talking about that long of an engagement, that's not something that necessarily lends itself well to text message versus, you know, if you're saying about like a bill payment, it's, you know, your bill and the amount of this much is due. You know, that's something that's very succinct, very easy. Kind of the call to action is pretty obvious there. So I guess no immediate plans to incorporate, you know, bill alerts or these sort of usage alerts via text in the near term. And that sort of gets into the next question about, you know, did we continue these? And when you think about how we structured these alerts, it was really, you know, looking at what that trigger for communication was. And because we set this, you know, $25 bill over bill increase, the reason that we did that is because we figured there would be a lot of customers that would sort of meet that threshold and that we would have the opportunity to send these alerts to, given the time period that we were delivering them. So sort of the cooling season ramping up, you know, from June, July, August. That's why we saw a decent amount of customers hit that $25 threshold that like warranted sending that alert. And then by the time we got to the fall, you know, even like August to September, you start to see that average temperature is, you know, about the same, usage is about the same. There's not that many customers that are exceeding that threshold anymore. So we actually stopped them after last summer. And then now we've got, you know, a host of different types of communications that we're testing out. And it's a manual process for my team at this point. Like nothing is really automated, like the analytics and the like sending the emails. So the amount of sort of complexity we can handle with different types of communications right now is a bit limited, but it's something that we have on our radar to pick up again at some point in the future or incorporate.
Thanks, Amy. And there's
Yep.
one more question for you.
Okay.
Did you use similar subject lines with all the sends?
We did. That was something that, you know, it would have been great to do some A/B testing, like 100%, but we, you know, I think we were just trying to get these, you know, customized communications out and didn't want to overcomplicate things too much at that point. I think if we had continued and, you know, maybe the next time that we do this can start to think more about, you know, doing some A/B subject line testing, like the tool that we use to deliver the emails allows for that pretty easily.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Yep, sure thing.
So since we have time, and I know Dustin responded to some of your couple of questions towards him, but I think I want to ask him to expand his response to those questions. The first being, I think it's a question from Kara. So I know you responded, but maybe you can expand on your response.
Yeah, so it looks like the question was about the pre-cooling with the gap period. So it's kind of weird because you pre-cool way before the event, and then there's this gap where nothing's happening. So the question was the idea to carry it through to the event? I think initially, partially that was the idea. Whether that actually happens, I mean, 3 hours is a long time in Phoenix for your house to heat back up. It's not really clear. It seems like if there's any impact of that, it's minimal. But APS likes the pre-cooling because it helps them absorb solar. So they're keen to keep it as long as it's not too disruptive. And if it has some sort of positive impact on the customer comfort, then that's fine. And yeah, does it result in people turning the heat up to take the chill off? Yeah, some people don't like pre-cooling because they don't like it getting that cold, or they just don't like, you know, they set their temperature where they want it. They don't like it being pushed down. So they'll complain about it during the surveys, or they can always just go over and move it back and to opt out of the pre-cooling, and like they have that capability. This isn't like strictly enforced. They can override it if need be. But yeah, some of the survey responses, people do complain about that.
Okay. And then I think the answer to the next question, which Sanem asked, was about the control that you've updated your control group.
Yeah, we reran the matching process periodically throughout the season. It kind of depended on how many extra days were available in the matching period, and how much time had passed since the last event, how many new enrollments there were and stuff. We didn't do it before every event just because in some cases it didn't seem like it would buy a lot, and it actually is a rather time intensive process because there's a lot of data that goes into that process. So it's kind of a balancing act between how much it's buying you and how much time it takes to run, because the whole point of this is to be fast, and if we're rerunning matching every time, it's not as fast. And so in cases where we thought it wouldn't make too big of a difference, we just kept existing matches, and I would say we usually refreshed it 2 or 3 times throughout a season.
Okay, well, thank you for that. There's a question here from Leah Lupkin to Sanem, and I'm going to ask Sanem to speak through this. She back?
Yes, I have to drop, unfortunately, in about a minute, but essentially the pilot has confirmed a lot of the findings from other pilots in terms of the peak demand impacts. We have fit in a regression line that sort of correlated the peak to off-peak ratios with the peak demand reductions, and plugged in the ratios from the PC44 pilot, and then the impacts that we got were pretty consistent with the ones that we quantified in the actual evaluation. But we received a few sort of unexpected results, such as off-peak usage not increasing in a statistically significant way, and that there are reasons for it. It's most likely being this very sort of intense messaging that the customers received about load shifting, and our guess is that some of that has turned into conservation. But really, I mean, the 2 big results from this pilot, which has not been analyzed in the same care and attention, is the ones about LMI customers, as well as the structural winners. So that those 2 are the biggest contribution of this pilot to the literature, and that it's a 2-year pilot, and the results were very consistent throughout the pilot during COVID. So we expected tons of customers to sort of drop out of the pilot because of COVID, but attrition was very limited. So that was also very encouraging.
Thank you, Sanem. At this point, we are moving to the breakout room, I was told, and I'd like to take this opportunity. It was an honor to be your moderator for today.